European Commission VP of Transport Siim Kallas recently briefed the press on his trip to Washington this week. With whom did he meet?
Mr. Kallas met with the Department of Homeland Security, Janet Napolitano. He met with the Department of Transportation, Secretary Ray LaHood. He met with senior executives at the Department of State. And he also met with congressmen, including Congressman John Mica.
What were the specific topics of discussion?
Well, Mr. Kallas told the media that he had basically come in and talked about three primary issues. There's, of course, always the security issue. There's the issue, which is a real contentious one with the EU, of the U.S. ownership restriction on U.S. airlines, which is limited 24.9% voting control. And the third issue is another controversial one as far as the U.S. is concerned, which is the emissions trading scheme that will begin coming into effect in 2012.
During his opening remarks to the EU Forum on Transatlantic Aviation Competitiveness, he expressed concern that U.S. and EU carriers are losing market share to competitors from Asia and the Middle East. Did he offer solutions?
He did. I think that the challenge that Vice President Kallas walks is that, frankly, many of the, in my opinion, many of the challenges that the European airlines face in particular are often the result of official policy within the EU or within national governments. So, for example, obviously one issue is the emissions trading scheme. The EU is determined to apply that to its own airlines. It's also determined to apply it to every airline that flies into the EU. This is very controversial with the U.S., but in addition, it's very costly, and it's going to cost European airlines more because they're obviously affected on every flight, since every flight of theirs is going to start or end in an EU country, and it's going to be less so for other airlines whose networks only touch on the EU on certain flights and which have hubs outside the EU. So that's a cost that their airlines are going to bear to a greater degree than other countries' airlines. There's another issue, of course, airport capacity. It is very, very difficult to get any new capacity in Europe. We just saw the UK government basically throw away years and years of planning on additional runways at Heathrow. In the Middle East and in Asia, where air transport tends to be viewed far more favorably, there is always opportunity to add runways and airports, and there are far fewer noise restrictions. There are 24-hour airports, which suit freight aircraft particularly well. Another issue is the passenger rights legislation, which again is very controversial for airlines. It basically makes the airline responsible for a trip interruption regardless of the cause of the trip interruption. So when Spanish controllers walk off the job, airlines become liable to take care of the passengers whose plans have been disrupted. When heavy snow or ice closes an airport and the airport is unable to handle it, airlines become responsible for that. When a volcano erupts in Iceland and airspace is closed by the air navigation service providers or by the aviation regulatory authorities, airlines become responsible for that. These impose enormous costs on the airlines, and again, it is something that airlines in other parts of the world do not have to contend with except on those services that touch the EU. So right there, we have some major problems that hurt EU airlines' competitiveness, and yet it is up to the EU and the EC to take action. Now, all that said, Vice President Kallas made it clear that indeed there is some recognition on at least some of these things, that there does need to be an airport policy that allows for growth, that there does need to be a way to recognize force majeure situations so that a volcanic eruption or an air traffic control strike does not result in airlines being liable for millions and millions of euros in compensation, but the controllers who walked off the job or the airport that didn't have enough snow plows has no liability whatsoever. He does seem to appreciate those challenges. But the other simple fact of the matter is, I mean, European and U.S. airlines may be losing market share overall, but part of that is simply the fact that the traffic growth, by and large, is not occurring in North America, and it's not occurring in Europe. It is occurring in Asia Pacific, particularly in China, in India, and it's occurring in the Middle East. The Middle East carriers in particular, of course, the EU has a disagreement with them because they feel that they're siphoning traffic out of EU hubs into Middle Eastern hubs. But the fact is that in an open market, the most efficient provider is going to win out. I mean, that's just the way it is. And no one at the EC wants to take specific protective measures to deliberalize airspace. Would like to come back to sort of the tenor of the discussions with the various U.S. officials when he met. Vice President Kallas said that in meeting with Secretary Napolitano on security, there's two main issues. The one is body scanners. Obviously, the U.S. remains committed to them, privacy issues notwithstanding. There are some efforts being made to make them less intrusive, but by and large, DHS is highly committed to them. The European view is that the intrusion on personal privacy is too great to tolerate at this point. Now, this view does not mean that body scanners are not in use, but it is going to make it difficult to make them universal. That one he felt can probably finessed. New technology, again, is rendering will render this problem probably superfluous, because we'll have body scanners that just show a body outline and a threat identified. The other issue that he admitted is going to be much tougher to work around is the liquids ban, which has been in place since the exposure of the transatlantic bomb plot a few years ago. The U.S. still stands by it. 3 ounces of liquid contained in, what is it, a 1-liter bag? I can't remember. And the EU seems ready to move forward on lifting that ban. I think they're comfortable that they can handle that. So that's going to be a little controversial. Ownership is, of course, forever a problem. It was a big challenge during the Open Skies negotiations between the U.S. and the EU, and it's still a big challenge. U.S. law says that foreign control of a U.S. airline is limited to 24.9% voting control, 49% equity control. In the EU, it's just 49% voting control is the limit. It would take an act of Congress to change this. There's very little momentum in Congress right now to do that. As I said, Vice President Kallas met with John Mica, the head of the Infrastructure Committee in the House, and he didn't really discuss the tenor of the conversations, but he certainly showed a clear understanding of the U.S. political process and really didn't want to get drawn into what he correctly identifies as a U.S. situation. But it's out there. The ETS, he said basically it seems like he talked to everyone about that issue. But again, my own sense was that he really is hoping to find a compromise. U.S. airlines have filed their own lawsuit. The U.S. government is not involved in that lawsuit, trying to block the imposition of the ETS on non-EU airlines. And the tone that Vice President Kallas took was really to suggest that if there can be some the equivalent measure in the U.S. To show that U.S. carriers are also doing something for the environment, that the U.S. government is requiring something. It really seemed like he's looking for a compromise. He made it clear he does not want to have any kind of transatlantic trade war over this issue. So I actually came away with that with a more positive feeling than I'd had in the past, that there may be a way to resolve this thing without it getting really, really ugly.
Thanks, Perry.